was looking at the everydaybuddhist.org, and you host classes there, and you have like it's kind of like a subscription model. Is that right?
Yeah. It's like I call it the Spotify of Buddhism.
Yes.
So you have access to 36 courses, 12 guest speaker series, the blogs, the live events. Yeah, as soon as you enroll, you have availability to all that. And then the other thing that makes it a little bit unique is the other feedback we got from our students was that if you go to Tricycle, well, first of all, they're personality driven, and we're not. We're not personality driven. So we kind of emphasize authentic content in a contemporary style. But the other thing is when you go to Tricycle, for example, they just have a lot of different courses, and you just kind of jump around and pick what you want. And our students said, we'd really like to have a curated, ordered curriculum, an organized presentation of Buddhism. So that's another thing we leaned in on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How has that process been going? Like where you're a little bit more structured and providing more of an overview? Is that kind of the initial approach, or is there something that you can that each individual teacher can kind of specialize in?
What we did is we kind of started with the origins of Buddhism, kind of in chronological order, and then we went to understanding, the doctrine and the teachings and things like that, and then the third pillar we call it deals a lot more with practice, like you are. It has a lot to do with what do you do in your everyday life and how do you practice. And so students are free to jump around. We don't enforce the order, but it's color coded, and it's kind of suggested that if you might want to take it in order, but you don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that kind of freedom would allow someone to, take a peek at another topic that might be of interest, and then that might, be like, oh, well, if I need to know if it would be helpful for me to know this foundation information, then maybe I'll dip back into the more chronological and more I guess more organized approach to it. And as someone that is developing this curriculum and someone that also is within the Jodo Shinshu community, I mean, how has it felt for you as a Buddhist to organize that curriculum and to kind of look at sources and to delve deep into questions that students might have?
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's just the recording and the editing of it and the managing of the site is a lot of work, but it's been really enjoyable. A lot of it is from IBS. All three of the instructors graduated from IBS. One of them has her doctorate from Rokoku in Japan as well. So we have the material. We have the content. It was a matter of putting together the PowerPoint and organizing and things. And we would do like a course a month, so it wasn't too bad.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
And does the active studying, has it been enriching to your own approach, like to your, like as you kind of approach your everyday as a Buddhist, like have you kind of, as you've learned more about the history or learned about certain figures along the way, has it kind of deepened your sense of connection to Buddhism?
Yeah, it's helped me a lot. It's given me kind of an overall picture. And one of the things we really try to do is sometimes Jodo Shinshu is kind of promoted as so unique. And Shinran was such an isolated lone genius that sometimes it seems like it loses its moorings to the tradition. And so but some of the ministers I've talked to, they're trying to make the distinction between general Buddhism and Jodo Shinshu much less.
Mm.
So, and every tradition, I used to watch videos from the Tibetan tradition. I mean, they look at Buddhism through their Tibetan lens, and they never really state it, and sometimes they don't even acknowledge it. But, everybody's giving you their tradition's interpretation of the Buddhist path. And so we kind of tried to embrace that and really bring out, Pure Land ideas and this idea of other power and having the path kind of compel you to seek. And so I think that's one of the unique things about the school. We really tried to merge, Jodo Shinshu is not on an island somewhere. It's part of Mahayana Buddhism. And the other thing I came to the conclusion a couple of weeks ago, and I'm included in this critique, is I don't think most Americans really know much about Mahayana Buddhism. They don't understand the mythology of it, the icons, the statues, the sutras are wildly poetic. And one of the books I've read that was saying this, he said that most Americans like Theravadan Buddhism, or what they think is Theravadan Buddhism, because the whole thing can be explained in one paragraph by the Buddha. And so I think we just don't understand how otherworldly and how grand the vista, the spiritual vista is. And it's not just the larger sutra, right? It's the Nirvana Sutra and the Lotus Sutra. They're wild. And we're no different. It's just basic Mahayana Buddhism. And I think most Americans just don't understand that.
Do you think that there's a particular reason that maybe some uh, Americans that are currently unfamiliar with Buddhism might not be, I guess, interested in Mahayana Buddhism, or wouldn't want to delve deeper into it? Like, is there something that you think that would be a little bit abrasive, or just like is contributing to that block?
Yeah, I'm also part of this phenomenon. When I first came to OCBC in 1999, I we do a lot of concept matching. So, whatever I saw that reminded me of Christianity, I would kind of lock onto that. And I also, there's also a thing called Buddhist modernism where we tend to focus on meditation and the doctrine. Like we want to learn things. It's almost like we want to get rid of our old Christian rules and adopt a new set of rules. And it's like if we change the set of rules we have, that's how we will change, our spiritual journey. And we really don't pay much attention to practice. So I think, and I don't think Theravadan is really presented accurately in the United States either. But this idea that it's very scientific, it's very rational, it's especially scientific, right? There's no statues, there's no cosmic elements at all, and it's mainly just a lone practice. You create your own journey and you create your own path. It's really hard to get over kind of the caricature of Buddhism in the United States. And I almost, I mean, I was about to quit OCBC like every couple months for the first 4 years because I was like, this isn't Buddhism. You know, I don't know what we're doing. I'm not learning enough. I'm not reading enough. I was really focused on texts. And I had no appreciation for sangha.
Yeah.
And
And
then the other problem is, real quick, you know this too, I'm sure, that Amida Buddha like sounded like a god to me, and the Pure Land sounded like heaven. And then the other problem is, and it makes sense, but a lot of the words that we use in our tradition come from Protestant Christianity because two reasons. Those were the religious words that were available to the Japanese when they came here, and they also wanted to fit in. So, we sang hymns and somebody would use the word grace and faith. And, we had an organ in our hondo and we called them pews. And so there's another problem we have with Pure Land Buddhism is it superficially appears to be Christian-like or something.
yeah, and if I'm remembering correctly, you had a Christian upbringing. Like you came from a Christian community before you found OCBC. And if I may ask, what tradition within Christianity were you part of? And then what was that process like of shifting gears?
So I was a Protestant. I was not Catholic. Everybody at OCBC, for some reason, thinks I was Catholic. I don't know why. I keep telling them, I wasn't Catholic. So I was Protestant. So when we get newcomers to our temple, the Catholics, this is a generalization, a broad generalization, but they tend to like the ritual. They like the altar. They like the singing. That they like that ritual part of it. But when Protestants come, not so much. And we really want to learn things and we want to study. And so, and the other funny thing about Protestant Christianity, a friend of mine told me is, they broke away from Catholicism with Martin Luther. So they have this splitting thing in their DNA. So every time the Protestants get in an argument, they split. So, I mean, there's so many schools. So when I was little, we were Methodist, which I thought was a nice church. And I've heard it has a lot to do not only with the denomination, but also with the minister that's there. So when I was little, I would go to Sunday school, and Jesus was like, it was Jesus focused, and he was really a nice guy, and he was nice to the animals, and he was nice to kids. But when I got older, we moved and we went to a Lutheran church. And Lutheran is a bit more, I think, conservative, and that they might have had an extra conservative minister there, but it was very different. It was much more strict and much more orthodox. And our family kind of drifted away. It wasn't a good fit for us. And so I read the Bible a lot in high school. I've always been, I think, kind of looking back, kind of spiritual, but I think the judgmental part of it didn't appeal to me. And I also was very moral and judgmental and ethical, but I was very unhappy. So like in terms of behavior, I was like a model citizen, but I was miserable. And I couldn't figure out, like, the question was, what's the point of being good? If you're miserable, I don't understand something's not right here. And then this happens a lot to new people that come. My dad was an alcoholic for my whole life. And I had this fantasy that when he hit, I don't know, 65, he'd stop drinking, and he'd be perfectly fine, and he'd be a great grandfather. But he died suddenly. At least to me, it seemed sudden at 60 years old when I was 33. And that I just didn't see that coming. I was living kind of in a dream. And even if he stopped drinking at 60, the damage was so profound. You don't just regenerate. And so a lot of new people, they have the same narrative. It's just the details are different. So there's usually some type of crisis in their life, and everything falls apart, and they're looking for something. And Buddhism seems to be like a lifeline.
Mm, mm.
So, and the year my dad died of alcoholism, my best friend committed suicide in hindsight, I guess I should have seen the signals, but I'm not trained and I didn't see it. And then my boss's wife was driving to Tustin to go to a ranch where she keeps her horse. She was going to ride her horse. Somebody ran a red light and T-boned her, and she broke a bunch of ribs. And I guess one of the ribs broke and slashed her aorta, and she died suddenly. So this was a lot. I'm 33, and 3 people died within a couple months. And I knew I had to do something else because I had tried, the joke is I have tried everything else. I tried money, job, marriage, children, travel, concerts, and it was always temporary. It never really satisfied me. And so everybody dying was 1994. My wife was getting a degree for teaching, and she had to do something. She took a social diversity course, and she had to go do something outside her comfort zone that she was already always interested in. And we kind of heard about Buddhism and thought it was peaceful and kind, and we needed something relaxing. So we went to Hanamatsuri. We just looked it up on the internet, and we found OCBC. And I remember as a family, we walked into the Hondo, and the lights, the altar was lit, the incense were burning. It was very quiet and peaceful, and it kind of envelops you. It's designed to have that emotional response where you're kind of, you just feel at peace. And I remember thinking and saying to myself, I wish my life felt the way the altar looked. So, we were all into Buddhism after that, but, we had 2 kids and we were busy with work, and a month later we forgot about it. So in 1999, I finally at work bought a book from Amazon on March 16th, and it was Awaken the Buddha Within by Lama Suryadas. And it basically said all my problems were self-inflicted, that it wasn't my dad, it's not the world, the problem was me. And so I read 3 books. I read a Tibetan book, I read a Theravadan book, and I read a Zen book, which is That's what people do in America. Those are the three. And then we decided a week after Mother's Day that we should go to a Buddhist temple because the Zen book kept saying you have to find a teacher. Like you can't do this on your own. Don't be a nightstand Buddhist. So we went on the internet and we looked around again and we found another Buddhist church, we thought. But Dale Avenue sounded familiar to us and we kind of realized we found the same church twice. So, we went, I was really lucky. My whole family went because sometimes families, there's friction. The wife doesn't want to go, but the husband does. And so luckily we all went as a family. My wife signed us up as members that very week because she was afraid that this was my last chance and she didn't want me wiggling off the hook. So we became members at OCBC that May of 1999, and it was just a slow journey from there.
Wow.
Yeah, but it was hard. I mean, Buddhism wasn't what I thought it was, and I didn't understand what was going on, and you get overwhelmed because there's chanting and incense and bells, and it's very disorienting.
Yeah. And especially like given your Protestant background, and then you kind of move into a more uh, ritualized space, or things that have ritual elements to it that you're not necessarily used to in that environment, nor a lot of the underpinning kind of principles and philosophies that are a part of it, and yet you stuck with, and well, and I'm so, mhm.
Well, I was going to say, I think I stuck with it because I had no other choice. It's almost like Shinran. It was almost like this was my last hope, like Officer and a Gentleman with the, I have nowhere else to go. Like if I dropped out, there was nothing else I could do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you had tried, and like you were saying, like you had tried everything. You tried like concerts, traveling, all the things that are uh I guess maybe shown to us in an American society that are supposed to be fulfilling, or supposed to fill those gaps or those questions. And yet you had that kind of that feeling that didn't feel quite fully nourished yet. And then you went, and then as you like, was it a difficult transition in the sense, just even for your own self, not necessarily in the awkwardness
Oh,
maybe of
right.
finding your footing in a new community, in a new tradition, in a new religion, but even just for yourself, was there like, oh, I have to drop my connection with uh, major fundamental Christian values or major Christian elements, or have you kind of sustained some of those while you approach your time as a Buddhist?
Yeah. So I was gonna answer one thing you said about me. I think that uneasy feeling that I had is literally the first noble truth. I just
Mm,
felt like something was hinky, right? It's not suffering. It's just something was hinky. It just seemed something was off, and I just couldn't put my finger on it. It's just
yeah.
this irritating, like something's just not right, and I can't figure out what it is. So yeah, I did have. Um, I mean, it took me a while. I felt really guilty about like I slowly didn't really believe in God anymore. Like, like I think I always had an issue with Christianity that when I read the stories, well, there were two things that bothered me. One was I don't think Christianity in the United States is that Jesus focused. It's very Old Testament focused, and I don't really think they focus on the teachings of Jesus, which was a problem for me. Um, the other thing was I didn't ever really, I think, believe in a literal God. When I read the stories, they lived in a time where angels would come to you and there were miracles. And I mean, there was stuff going on, the Red Sea would part and there would be locusts. And it just seemed like that was describing a time that doesn't exist anymore. Like, I don't know, maybe it was true then. I mean, I don't think so. But even if it was true then, I don't see anything like that now. Nobody's getting messages. Nobody's seeing visions. Now the Christians may say people are, you're just not open to it or something, but it just seemed like it was talking about a bygone era that just isn't relevant. It just that's not the way things are now. And so I think over time, the more I studied Buddhism, I didn't like they don't ask you to reject your Christian beliefs. I mean, you can believe in whatever you want because I think Buddhism's more based on practice than beliefs. But over time, yeah, I'm very rusty now with Christianity. I just don't. it's been 25 years and I just don't think about it anymore. But I remember thinking like, I was driving in my car and I thought, there's a thunderstorm and I could get hit by lightning, because I don't believe in God anymore. I was kind of really dramatic. But yeah, I had to go through kind of a, not detox, but I did kind of, I mean, it's just natural. I kind of shifted from one spiritual um, worldview to another. And I just, yeah, I don't, and to be fair, Christianity is not a monolith, and there's a lot of great Christian philosophers or theologians that don't think of God as a literal person. So, it's a big tent as well. But yeah, my kind of conservative Christian beliefs were challenged, and um, I became much less judgmental. Um, I kind of don't judge people as much as I used to because I don't know, in the same circumstance I might do the same thing, and I don't really know the whole story. So, things have gotten a lot more gray. Everything's a continuum now. It's not as black and white.
Yeah. I can certainly appreciate that sense of the grayness and just kind of embracing that grayness, because especially as we were talking about earlier with everydaybuddhist.org and just kind of going over the overview and that integration or that perception that Jodo Shinshu, that's something separate than the rest of the Buddhist fabric, or Vajrayana, the lens through which maybe people that are a part of that community, uh, maybe just like, not generally, but like some people might just only see it through a Tibetan lens and that's it, where there is like more of a broadness and an openness to Buddhism, and to just general experience, like however you decide to align yourself or feel affiliated towards any kind of particular religion. There is, I'm finding for myself that embracing that grayness has been a really interesting space to be in. And I'm very happy to hear that, as you develop this relationship with OCBC, and you started to kind of shed some things and incorporate some new things into your life, that judgmental quality of yours, that you had mentioned, started to subside a little bit. And I was curious, like, what if you were to help somebody get over judgmentalness, or how they would maybe, if you had any kind of tips or tricks that help you reaffirm that space in your mind, because we're all humans, we all have sometimes things come up or whatever it is, but or also too, just like a major guiding principle that helps you kind of tether yourself back in for making sure that you aren't judgmental of others.
Well, I think the big thing for me, well, somebody told me that because of my background with my alcoholic father, it's very interesting that I chose Buddhism, and that it was like I was trying to heal myself. I was looking for help. And, that one of the main taglines we have is you're accepted just as you are. So I think that all embracing, you're okay as you are, you're not flawed, it's not a defect in you or your family. I think that message really resonated in a kind of a subconscious level. Um, and for me, the big healing was with my father. He died suddenly. I had a lot of anger. I was, yeah, very angry with him. But I remember I like to run, and I was running, and each step, it seemed like I would think, the worst thing that's ever happened to me is my dad dying. And then the next step was, if my dad hadn't have died, I never would have become a Buddhist. And his life was almost an example or a teaching to me of what not to do. It's almost like he martyred himself for me. He taught me, like, don't work 70 hours a week like I did. You know, uh, there's much more to life than money and work, and it'll kill you if you're not careful. So one of the things that's really helped me, and I've just come across this recently, is rather than looking at the world as good and bad, or true and false, or black and white, I try to look now at the events in my life in terms of meaning. So, like, my dad's death had deep meaning, right? It's both tragic, and it changed my life for the better, and I felt guilty about realizing that. Like, this is great. My dad died, now I'm a minister. So you have to hold both of those ideas in your head at the same time, and it's the meaning of the events in your life, not so much whether they're good or bad, but how they impacted you, the choices you made differently because of it. Um, so if you think it's bad, you want your past to be different, and you yearn for a different story to tell. But the way I tell it is all the facts on the ground of my life are exactly the same, but the way I interpret them and the way I cognize them and the way I process them has totally changed. So, he wasn't weak. He wasn't a bad father. Um, he used to get up at like 6 in the morning and cook me breakfast before football practice in high school. My mom didn't do that. And my dad had a splitting hangover, and he was what do they call it? He wasn't a words of affirmation guy. He was acts of kindness. So that's another thing, these 5 love languages. If my dad, I don't think ever really told me he loved me, but that wasn't his love language, and then I started realizing, oh, he did all this other stuff because he wasn't giving me what I wanted. I need words of affirmation. So, all that change of perspective and the orientation without changing the facts, I think is very healing.
Mm. I I really appreciate you bringing up such meaningful elements of your life and talking about them, because it's just helpful for me to. I mean, it's a wonderful story. It's a meaningful story. I mean, like there are really hard moments about it, but it's a very meaningful story, and I'm grateful that you share it. And it's been helpful for me just to help reevaluate, because yeah, I the good, the bad binary creep up all the time. And when you eat something doesn't taste good, or someone does something in traffic that's not awesome, then you get all these kind of judgmental qualities that come up. And I think that kind of sitting in this very vast experience that we can all have, and maybe tune ourselves to um, perceiving things that can be moments of practice. I know, like this idea that thinking of your father living a life almost like a martyr, in the sense of, and like a teacher maybe showing you exactly what not to do, or what to be careful of.
Hmm.
um, and showing you like another element of experience. I mean, it's really helpful to hear. So I appreciate you kind of going into it. And I know that for your own journey into becoming a sangha leader, that you kind of admit to having missteps here and there, and like learning moments for yourself. And do you kind of give that to did you give that kind of openness and space to yourself when you make a mistake, or when you uh, have something that you feel guilty about or shameful about, that you kind of also like see it as a meaningful moment? And how does that affect you?
That's probably something I need to work on. I always want to be perfect. That's my problem. But I think it's from my family background. I always wanted to, I kind of bought into this, the perfect family, like the Brady Bunch, or, My Three Sons was always a great one. We really have like this narrative or this theme in the United States of coming from a perfect family. And I've noticed people don't mean anything by it, but like if your daughter and son are a doctor and a lawyer, man, you are a great father. And it's weird. We have these stereotypes and stuff, you know. And so we have a certain cultural standard for what it means. And I've realized as a minister that all families have issues. This perfect family thing is a unicorn. And so that's helped me a lot. I mean, everybody's got issues once you start to counsel or be a minister, and it's normal. It's not odd or bad or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when is that a part, like as part of your ministerial work? I mean, is there one element of serving your sangha that is something that is most fulfilling for you, or that you're most eager to participate in? Like whether it is kind of helping somebody with their home life, their personal life, their sense of self within the world, their sense of engagement with Jodo Shinshu. Is there something that you feel the most eager to help with?
I think the thing I like the most is giving Dharma talks and teaching. I really enjoy that. Yeah.
And I believe that you have a course right now with everydaybuddhist.org that is like what you do on Monday. Is that right? Or is it something like
Yeah,
that?
that was my catchy title.
Yeah.
Because you go to church on Sunday and we're everyday Buddhists, and then on Monday you're at work. What am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah. Well, so is it okay if we kind of discuss like the elements of that course? Because it sounds like it's a really helpful, applicable course to what you do after the observing a service. So how do you go about going addressing your Monday?
Well, we try to encourage people to have some sort of at-home practice. It's nice to have some kind of a spiritual space in your house that's kind of dedicated. Um, Meditating. The other thing the course talks a lot about is a lot of people, and this happens with my wife as a yoga instructor. People come to the temple or to yoga and they're really super enthusiastic and they're like all in. And my wife and I joke that, you're never going to see them again. And the reason why is their expectations are so high. They want a complete 180 in like a couple weeks. And I actually did have one minister. He was teaching and he was talking to the class, but he kind of pointed his finger and he looked at me and he said it takes about 10 years to understand Pure Land Buddhism if you come from the outside. And so, you know, what I try to teach people is that you kind of get in a mess by developing a bad habit, but it's very gradual and it's very small, and you don't even realize you're doing it. But these little behaviors over time become ingrained habits, like just like smoking or drinking or eating the bad diet or not exercising enough. You just do these things, and before you know it, it's effortless and it's a way of life. So I think what the Buddha was saying is, I can't change. Nobody can change their nature. We're like this. We're human. We're habit makers. That's what we do. But what the Buddha did is he gave us other little simple, easy behaviors that we could adopt over time that would develop into good habits. So, I encourage people to meditate, like maybe just 5 minutes a day. Something really, really small. Something. There's a sociologist or a behaviorist named B.J. Fogg, and he said the only change that's successful, that works over time and becomes permanent, is doing a behavior that you already know and is super easy. It takes no willpower. And so, just sitting on a cushion for 5 minutes, you know how to do that. It's really easy. It doesn't take any time. But over time, that quiet sitting begins to bleed out into your everyday life. That you start to create what we call a gap between reacting and responding. Like just waiting a minute or two before you come back at somebody, it makes a huge difference in your response. So that's what the class is a lot about. Even if you don't like sitting, you could chant the Jusege. You could read, a chapter a night from a book. I mean, so we really try to make it something very easy, very reproducible. Drive in your car and listen to, um, Buddhist sutras, or just take a walk with your dog every night. Just try to find some time where you can focus and be self-aware. And so, that's kind of what the course is about.
Yeah. And I like how inclusive it is in the sense of it can be really something that is easy, something that someone already does or knows, and can
Yes.
then just all it takes. And I say that easier said than done because it's hard to implement a new habit, but all it takes is that active approach in the mindset of like I am doing this as part of that, or like I am doing this with my full focus and attention, and it's okay if it doesn't go as planned, but like that is the intention. And I think that is it's really wonderful to hear how much can be incorporated. And uh, is there any additional emphasis or interest in I remember you mentioned having like some sort of sacred space within the home. Is there any kind of interest in getting people to have a more active relationship with an altar space, like a Butsudan or
Yeah.
anything like that too?
Yeah. So, yeah, we encourage, it's not a lot of people too at Everyday Buddhist, they don't live near a temple or go to a temple and they're not part of a sangha. So they would like to, have an Obutsudan in their house and they'd like to set up, an area that they could, because the work-life boundaries now are very blurred. So I think it's really helpful to say, like this corner of my room is off limits, right? The whole house is because when during COVID, we were doing our work at the kitchen table, the dining room table, in the family room, and you get emails and texts, and it's overwhelming. So this would be a place, you know. And the thing that BJ Fogg said is that all the other ways of developing habits fail, like wanting to lose 10 pounds in a month, you might lose 10 pounds, but you'll gain back 20. So it's this idea that it has to take no willpower. It has to be something really, really simple, very, very short. And that, that neuroplasticity will over time become, it's like drinking coffee or these other things we do. Like I can't go to bed at night if I don't brush my teeth.
Mm.
It's been internalized as a habit. Now, dental floss is not, I've never done that with dental floss, but, and my wife's a dental hygienist, but I think, people, I think it gradually over time, I think you can change a lot, but it has to be something, very low expectations. The results, aren't even what you expect, but
Yeah.
they start to play out. And just even breathing, breathing with your diaphragm when you sit, that's supposed to reduce blood pressure and be naturally calming. And they claim that if you do that enough at home in a meditation practice, you begin to breathe like that at work or in your car, instead of being all hunched up and breathing up into your lungs, your shoulders are relaxed and you're breathing into your stomach. So, all these things over time, I think can have a huge effect.
Yeah. And I think an awareness of like that, like how you feel about brushing your teeth before you go to sleep. It's like once it's in, and it just becomes that kind of second nature, and making it become something like that, where just like how brushing your teeth is beneficial to your immune system and your heart and all that kind of stuff. Um, you can incorporate some of those, whether it's a mindfulness technique or it's a moment of gratitude or whatever it is that can be internalized and that can be of benefit and to kind of loosen the shoulders
Hmm.
and create a little bit, maybe a little more circulation, or just even just have it being nourishing in its own way. A quick plug, and this is not, I don't work for them at all. I'm just a fan, I guess. But if you're interested in a good dental floss, Dr. Tongues, I don't know if you know about that. They make a great, the kind of like it's just wide enough kind of thing. I can't believe I'm talking about dental floss, but it's good. And if you're interested, Dr. Tongues is a fun dental floss.
I'm sure my wife's heard of it. I'll ask her.
Okay. Yeah,
No,
okay,
I'm serious.
good. Yeah, good. And
Oh,
then
the other thing we do too is like we have a mindfulness service at night on
mm,
Wednesdays with Zoom. So, so one thing we tried to do is going from Sunday to Sunday is kind of that's a long gap. So when you hit hump day, you're halfway through to the next Sunday, you could go to a meditation or mindfulness service. Um, and then the other thing, I told you I kept almost dropping out because Pure Land Buddhism wasn't what I thought Buddhism was. And the funny thing is, I read 3 books, so I thought I was an expert, right? I read 3 books on Buddhism. Uh, um, I noticed that when I went to church on Sunday, I had a better week. Like I wasn't as irritable, I wasn't as frustrated, I wasn't as impatient. And before I became a minister's assistant, I mean, I would miss on Sundays sometimes, like there was a great football game, or I wanted to listen to Breakfast with the Beatles and go on a long run. But the next week was not as good. And so one of the reasons why I kept going was just I had a better week when I went. And so that kind of stuff I think, helps a lot too.
yeah. Oh, that's wonderful to hear too, where you just that engagement, that consistent engagement, and then noticing where it is, because sometimes you might say, oh, the football game, that's a nourishing activity for me to watch or to be a part of. Um, but you've done that plenty of times, and it doesn't, doing that instead of time with your sangha, it doesn't do the same effect.
Right.
I mean, I certainly know that if the game doesn't go the way that you want your team to go, it could be really frustrating, or it could, like, could create like a lot of like intention and intensity. Whereas typically a sangha, it doesn't have a competitive quality to it, and so you're there and you're more or less kind of engaging with people and having a sense of community.
Oh, and I was going
Um,
to say, I was so desperate about trying everything. I forgot to mention I was a long distance runner. I was running marathons. I was trying, I couldn't, and I realized I can't run myself to peace of mind. Like you would think going on a 10-mile run, listening to the Beatles, you would have a great Monday, right? But what could be better? What could be more healthy and enriching than that? But it wasn't. It didn't, it was always temporary. I mean, it worked, but it wasn't, it didn't sustain, it didn't have legs. And so
yeah,
I found that really interesting. I like when I said I tried everything, I literally, I have a lot of willpower. I mean, I'm really a self-power person. I was running 70 miles a week and, I just realized I can't run myself to peace.
yeah. and and like I hear you, where you kind of get sold, like, well, here I am going on my run and I'm listening to music that I love, and this is exactly like what's better than this. Like I have the freedom to do this space for myself, and the time to do it, and no one says don't exercise. So what could I be possibly doing wrong? And yet you found a space that kind of dealt with that dis-ease, or at least spoke to that dis-ease a little bit more.
Hmm.
um, and then I did want to get into it because the Beatles, I'm learning, are important to you. Is there how did that develop? Have the Beatles always been something that you've gravitated towards as one of your favorite bands?
Yeah, so two things. One is I thought I liked the Beatles because they're qualitatively the greatest band who ever lived, and it makes me super smart for liking them. But this kind of scared me. It's a Buddhist lesson. I was listening to Pandora Radio because I always listen to the Beatles, and I thought I've got to listen to something else. So I listened to Pandora Radio, which I think it may be gone now, but it plays a song and you say whether you like it or not. And so, they'd play songs and I would like them, and it was new and it had good variety. And then about after a couple weeks, they played Hey Jude. And I'm like, yeah, I like Hey Jude. And then within a week or two, my playlist became dominated by the Beatles. And it kind of freaked me out because this was before AI. And I thought, how did it know? Because I'm like right back where I started. So I went to all the songs that I liked, and it said things like, you like male harmonies. You like guitar over piano. And it said I liked vamping. And I don't even know. I have to look it up. I don't even know what vamping is. So this is kind of scary, but it's this causes and conditions. I was nurtured or compelled to like the Beatles. Like it wasn't a conscious choice. It's not free will, which is other power. So that kind of freaked me out. Like I didn't really choose to become a Buddhist. I didn't really like these aren't independent choices. Um, but I think what the Beatles did for me is I don't know what Paul is because I like him, but every time he has an interview, he says something different. He's very, I like him, but he always has a different story to tell. Um, I think Ringo would be Pure Land, Jodo Shinshu. He's not, but if I, that's what I think Ringo would be. John Lennon with Yoko Ono was influenced heavily by Zen Buddhism.
Hmm.
Yeah, a lot like instant karma. I mean, that's sudden awakening. Um, and then George, I didn't know this. I thought he was Protestant, but he was Catholic and became Hindu. So a lot of Eastern thought came through George's music. And I kind of submit that most of his music was spiritual. Like you think he's talking about a woman, but I think most of the time he's not. So I think that was my initial, like if I had to like figure out where did I first come in contact with Eastern thought, I think it was from the Beatles.
Yeah.
So that had a huge impact on me.
Okay. And even after this kind of like post freaked out Pandora experience, and then this like idea of like free will and like, choice in your life and all that. Do you still have an appreciation for them now? Like, do you feel like,
Oh
oh,
no,
it's,
they're no, yeah, I love them. They're yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I can't help but love them. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I hear you though. I think like the especially that time, that generation of music, there was this Eastern philosophy from various different traditions that were kind of seeping in into
Mhm.
um deeply earwormy songs. And I think they might have maybe opened some windows. I don't know if they were opening doors, but opening something to let people kind of like explore those concepts a little bit more and dabble. And for that I'm grateful too. And yeah, they would bring in like sitar sounds, and you'd be like, well, what is that? And then you'd look it up, and then here you are. You're kind of looking up something and becoming more familiar with a different culture. And uh, and this is just like something that I did because I'm super fun. But in high school, I wanted to open up my uh, music world, but I also wanted to listen to the best music that's ever been made at the same time. And so I started listening to the Rolling Stone magazine published 500 greatest albums ever,
Mhm.
and which is a big project for them to have done, and it's all very subjective. But I started it, and then only until like 2 years ago did I finally kind of get around to finishing it all the way. So listening to 500 different albums, all different types of music, all different types of artists, and Bob Dylan's on there like 12 times, but like like a lot of different people are there, and that was a really helpful thing that helped me appreciate genres like country and like jazz and like all these things that I would just kind of cross my arms and say, well, they don't sound like the Grateful Dead, or they don't sound like this band that I like in high school. But the that was a really wonderful um, way of kind of opening up a little bit and kind of in, getting some more inspiration to listen. So I just wanted to offer that as like a cool thing to do if you want to have a lot of fun. But anyway, yeah, I did appreciate you kind of going into your relationship with the Beatles, because it's a wonderful thing that you have where um, you found a way to apply, or to have it revealed that you have this like lesson in Buddhism just through your own relationship, or maybe even attachment to something.
Right.
Um, and then when it comes to Pure Land too, like, because I know you had mentioned earlier about, it takes 10 years to have a an appreciation, or like a greater grasp on like what Pure Land Buddhism is. How did that begin for you? Like when you started to read up on the different sutras, and especially like the three Pure Land sutras. I think the largest is the larger sutra, but
Yeah.
but there's a lot of poetry and descriptive imagery in, I believe, is the Contemplative Sutra,
Yeah.
of talking about Amita's Pure Land. And it's really dazzling and beautiful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how did that resonate with you?
Uh, yeah, I've had a hard time with that because I wanted to read sutras for knowledge. And they say that a lot of Americans, they want to read for doctrine. And I'm reading another book called Great Faith, Great Wisdom. And it says that a lot of the Mahayana teachings are what he calls incomplete teachings. And even Shinran's writings, they're incomplete in the sense that it kind of assumes that you understand the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, you understand impermanence and interconnectedness, and like it kind of assumes that you know the foundations of Buddhism. And then it goes on and presents like uh, this imaginary world, you know. And so sometimes it looks like it's metaphorical or not true. Um, One scholar said that it is true. It's the way a Buddha would see the world, especially with the larger sutra, right? It's describing a world as it would look to somebody who's awakened. Um, this book I've been reading, like I said, Great Faith, Great Wisdom, it's saying that it's trying to appeal to our imagination because we've imagined ourselves to be fixed and permanent and have a true self. We've imagined this fixed reality. and it's trying to give us a different alternative. It's trying to appeal to our imagination, in a way that aligns more with, impermanence and flow and interconnectivity. And so, these are I kind of read them more now as poetry or works of art, and I relate them a lot to song lyrics. It's ambiguous what they're saying. You could read the text on multiple levels, and I've read that this was all by design, right? That this isn't an accident. It's like writing a screenplay or a book. I mean, everything in Romeo and Juliet was placed there for a very specific reason. Establishing shots in movies, all that stuff has been storyboarded. So this isn't some wild, undisciplined rambling. It's a very profound spiritual text that's trying to transmit a feeling, or a new way of engaging the world. And so, what they say that people that's weird about Western people is, well, not weird, but what we do, and I know we do this when we read a cookbook, it's an algorithm of how to make something, and we just follow the directions. And when we read a novel, a spy novel, we read it differently than we read a cookbook. So we read different books in different ways, but when we come to the Bible, I think because of our Protestant background, it has to be historically, literally true. It's either historically, literally true, or it's false. And so, what they're saying is for the sutras, you really just can't read it that way. You have to read it as some kind of grand spiritual vision, or a poetic awakening. It's meant to trigger emotions in you. It's highly repetitive because it's supposed to be chanted and repeated. So, I've really tried to, change the way I read the sutras. You don't read it the way we read the Bible. It's not that kind of text. So again, it's not whether it's true or false. It's whether it has meaning. The meaning, you have to find the meaning of the stories, not did this really happen or not.
Yeah, and there's two, like, your use of the word imagination is really interesting, especially with its relationship to how we imagine ourselves.
Hmm.
That was I really liked how you got into that, where here we are imagining a Pure Land and all of its wonder and grandness, um, and you could look at that and say, well, that is uh, a spelled out, descripted, imagined world or land with all this different um, imagery that we can understand as humans there. Streams and trees, those are all things that exist in our world, so we can imagine it there. And yet, when the exercise of looking back and saying, like, well, what else am I imagining? And what else is here? And I know that, like, for some people within Jodo Shinshu, for some, that there is this concept of allowing for the Pure Land to exist, like, here in the here and now of this world. And I don't know how that concept or that sentiment resonates with you, but because I know it's not everyone subscribes to that. But if that sense of the presentness is something that you can feel, or can at least appreciate to some degree.
Yeah. So what I tell people, yeah, this is kind of a doctrinal issue. Is it here and now, or is it in the there and then? Um, and most of the time when people ask me, well, all the time when people ask me a Buddhist question, the answer has got to be and. It has to be both. So I kind of don't like these dualistic, false choices. The person that wrote Great Faith and Great Wisdom, he tends to see it in the here and now, but he's fine with people who see it in the there and then. It's perfectly fine to him. I did that recording I told you I did yesterday, the live event for Everyday Buddhist. I played the song Into the Mystic by Van Morrison.
Oh, yeah.
Van Morrison. And if you listen to it closely, it's hard to tell whether he's talking about the here and now or the hereafter. Like, I can't tell. It's a poetic, mystical song. I don't know which one he means. I can't tell. He's ambiguous. And I think it's both. So I think what times what Shinron's saying is you can experience the transcendent in the here and now and not have to worry about death anymore. And I this is kind of a provocative statement in Christian America, but I think from a Buddhist point of view, everyone goes to the same place. All waves return back to the ocean. There's nothing you need to be concerned about. Um, and the wave is not the ocean, but they share an essence, right? There's an essence, there's a depth. So you could live your life on the surface of the water and be completely unaware of the ocean's depth. And as you near the shore, it's scary. But waves don't die, they just go back into the ocean, which from whence they came when they manifested form. But you can realize that relationship in the here and now. And another book I read, it's called The Promise of a Sacred World by Nagapriya. He just did something really good. He said, we have Amida, we have the Pure Land, and we have Namo Amida Butsu. And it sounds like a noun, a person, a place, and a thing. But he said it's not, it's a relationship. It's a profound relationship with, infinite reality that manifests all around us. So when you start to talk about, is it here and now or is it after? I mean, the question doesn't really make a lot of sense, I don't think.
Mm-mm.
So anyway, that's the way I just don't like getting pushed into this either or. And the other thing I've told people is when I read books now, I don't care if I agree with the book or not. If they challenge my thinking and they help me develop my spiritual understanding, I love the book. So when I read these books, they're provocative and they say things that not all ministers might say, but I love to hear it. And Nagapriya and the authors of Great Faith, Great Wisdom, they're both from an Indian Buddhist tradition in England.
Mm.
And so they're looking at our tradition as outsiders and they're bringing like a really fresh perspective because they weren't trained at IBS or Rukoku, in the orthodoxy of Shinran studies. They're studying it literally as outsiders, but they're bringing a really fresh perspective to the Pure Land Sutras.
And does that kind of help you? Does that kind of incorporating into your life and study, hearing other people's perspectives, and whether or not they're upending more, I guess you could say like orthodox or more like common understandings or doctrinal understandings within Jodo Shinshu. Is it kind of exciting for you to have that? I mean, do you like the idea of it kind of bringing new ideas into your approach? And then what are some things that you've had shine a light on from an outsider that have helped you kind of understand something a little bit deeper, or is something that you want to kind of investigate more further?
Yeah, I mean, those two books right now are the greatest examples. We actually had Nagapriya do a guest speaker series for Everyday Buddhist. So it was great. He came and he talked and yeah, it really energizes me. To be selfish, it gives me new content. We need content in this internet world. Quotations, perspectives. Yeah, I really gives me a lot of creative. It wakes up my creative juices. It makes me think.
Mm-hmm.
It helps me not get into a rut and just give the same. I just don't want to give the same talk. I don't want to repeat.
Yeah. And I know that when we talked earlier, you had mentioned that Dharma talks are kind of where you like to be of service or to serve your sangha the most. It's like one of the avenues that you can do that and that feels the most fulfilling to you. What are some Dharma talks that you have given that you feel like really resonated with you and you feel like are important to hear, or like what kind of topics do you like to kind of get into with how you develop those?
Yeah, I think I try to make well, first of all, some ministers are really good at writing out their Dharma talks on 8.5 by 11 paper, double spaced with a large font. And then they read it from the lectern and they're so good at it that nobody knows they're reading. They're really good. You can't tell they're reading. But I've tried doing that, and I always have my head down, and I'm monotone, and everybody knows I'm reading, and there's just no energy. So what I do is I use PowerPoint slides as my outline. So I go through the slides, and it triggers me. And so my talks are a little bit more stressful for me because I'm kind of giving them without a net. There's no net. But I think the audience likes it because I'm thinking and speaking at the same time. Like my talk is actually being created in front of you, and every time I give it, it's going to be different. Um, and uh, and I try to make it personal. I don't I don't like find a I tend to, I mean, I don't really find a quote from Shinron and then explain it. I try to relate it, to music, to a song, to a movie. Um, so I usually try to make it kind of personal so people can relate to it.
Mhm.
And then
And
the other thing is I never know who's going to like what. That's the other scary part. It's like a movie. You make a movie, you don't know if it's going to be a hit or a bomb, and then some people love it. It resonates with some and not with others. And, you just, you just swing for the fence and yeah.
I think that's wonderful. I mean, I think that the as far as an audience goes, watching somebody who doesn't quite know how it's going to go
Right.
adds a little extra um dis distinguish between audience and performer, but you also have this tension that is supportive. There's like a support that comes through the listening of the audience that kind of helps the person who's trying to figure it out
Yeah. I
figure
think
it
when
out.
I pause to figure out what I'm going to say next, I can tell they're going, like, what's going to happen?
Yeah. Um, well, I think that that's a wonderful way of approaching it. And then I just had two more questions here before we come to a close of this. Has been such a wonderful conversation. But I know that OCBC, that is associated with the BCA, the Buddhist Churches of America
Uh-huh.
organization. You, as a community, as a larger community, you just celebrated 125 years or something like that.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah, we had our 125th. So the first two Jodo Shinshu ministers came to San Francisco in 1899, and it might have been the first Buddhists. I mean, yeah. So
wow?
125 years.
Wow. What was the celebration? What was the celebration like? I mean, did you end up traveling somewhere, or was it kind of you were able to participate remotely?
No, no, it's actually on the internet. They filmed the service. It's on the BCA YouTube channel.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we had all the ministers come in and wear our fancy formal robes. And we all, and there was gagaku music playing. It was very formal beginning. We chanted the Shoshinge. Um, there was a video from the great, I don't know how many greats it was, grandson of one of the ministers that came in 1899 or 1898. And then we had a really wonderful Dharma talk by Reverend Dr. David Matsumoto. So it was really nice.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and then OCBC, we're celebrating our 60th next year. This
Wow.
church started in 1965. So,
Wow. Wow. How exciting. The big momentous occasions all around. That's
mhm.
that's wonderful. And it's great that you were able to participate or that anyone's able to kind of check in on that and watch that celebration remotely wherever you are. And then my last thing is kind of a two-part where I was wondering if there's anything that you'd want to promote, like a cause or a book, want something that you're writing, something you're working on. I know that everydaybuddhist.org is something that you are working a lot on and creating a lot of live events and different teaching episodes for. And then also too, if there's any kind of advice that you'd want to give to somebody at any point along the Buddhist path that you would have wanted to have heard at some point when as you were walking it.
Well, the only thing I really ever do is Everyday Buddhist. I'm doing that all the time. It's so much work, but it's a labor of love. It's a very, like I said, our brand is to be authentic and contemporary. So it's a tightrope. It's a really fine line to walk. So we try to make Buddhism accessible, but maintaining, the authenticity of it. And people can go to our website at everydaybuddhist.org and just sign up for free blogs. So yeah, we're always available, and the courses are monitored by me. So you can ask questions. There's bibliographies. So it's a really nice way to get a comprehensive presentation of Buddhism. Um, and what was the other question?
Oh, just like if you had any advice for somebody at any point
Oh,
along the
oh,
path. Yeah.
yeah. I wish somebody had told me this sooner. So when you're new and you like I did, I bought a Theravadan book, a Tibetan book, and a Zen book. They were all sounded different to me. Like I've heard for some people they read all three books and it just sounds the same. But when I read it, I could tell there was a different emphasis, and it was confusing. And when I went to the Pure Land, when I went to Jodo Shinshu at OCBC, it sounded way different. We have a statue and we say Namo Amida Butsu all the time, and we're not really meditating very often. And I thought that was it. So I read a scholar saying once is that each school, there's just so many different schools of Buddhism. And one thing that confused me is the Orange County Buddhist Church. It's called a church, not a temple, which is confusing. And it was just Orange County Buddhist Church. Like I thought Buddhism was a monolith, right? It didn't say Pure Land or Jodo Shinshu. I thought there was just one thing, and it was Buddhism, and you meditate and you learn things. So what this scholar said is that you need to find a silo. You need to find a school. You need to find a home. So it might be Zen for you. It might be Tibetan. It might be Nichiren. It might be Pure Land. But you kind of have to find a home. You have to find a sangha that you can. The sangha is probably most important. And so it said that once you're in the silo, if you read sources from within your silo, it is self-consistent and it makes a lot of sense. But when you jump between silos, it gets very confusing. So everything is true and consistent and effective, and it works within a silo, but you kind of have to pick one. The jumping around thing is very disorienting. And I wish somebody had kind of told me that, if you read the Dalai Lama and then Thich Nhat Hanh and then Shinran, it's going to be more confusing than it needs to be. And so I think that would have helped me, that I just didn't know there were so many different schools. And they don't really differ on doctrine so much as in Protestant Christianity. They differ on practice. Like, how do you make progress? What do you do? What's the prescription? That's where they differ a lot. It's very interesting. It's a orthopraxy, not orthodoxy. And so I kind of wish, and I wish somebody had told me it takes a long time and you can't rush it, and just relax. And over time, it'll sink in.
And I do feel like there is a value in when you're beginning and you're having these questions of like spiritual questions or life questions, and you have that feeling of disease, that hinky, or and you're kind of like, what's going on? I think investigating and looking under a variety of stones and looking for like you taking a healthy exploration into things is really helpful. But yeah, like at a certain point, once you start feeling drawn to something, I think why not really try to relax into it and see what element of practice or what element of community or whatever it is that
Right.
might tie you in, and let it, and then if it's not the right fit, it's not the right fit. But I think, yeah, like that silo image, or that self-guiding image, where it's like, well, once you're in it, it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm really into this tradition. Well, while I'm in it, I'll talk to the people that are in it and see what they got out of it or whatever it is, and if it still resonates, great. But like that's where you get the good resources for that community or for that approach.
And I kind of use the analogy of joining a gym. It's like joining a gym. You got to find a gym that's close to your house. They got good hours. You like the people. And in general, when you work out or you want to join a gym, you kind of, like, I'm either going to focus on yoga, or I'm going to cross train, or I'm going to be a long distance runner. Um, and they're all good. They're all good. But, you do have to specialize a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you are like, oh, I want to go kickboxing today and then do swimming the other day, it's like that'd create like a really unique body thing. But if you're just starting out and you're doing these extremely different types of body movements, it can be a little straining, or it can be a little discombobulating for sure. Well, Reverend Turner, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I really appreciate you taking the time. This has been such a wonderful conversation, and I'm really excited about Buddhist.org moving into the live events, and it's such a wonderful resource. I took a look at the website. It's really well laid out, and I know you put a ton of time and energy into making the content for that, coordinating for that, making it available, and so that it can one day be the Spotify of Buddhism.
That's right. That's right.
But and I wish you the best of luck on it. It really is a wonderful project. And thank you again for talking to me today. Hope to catch up again another time.
Yeah, it was an honor. Thank you for inviting me very much, Vincent. Thank you.